Thank you. Good afternoon, members, and welcome to this meeting of Review of Standing Orders Subcommittee. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through our Council's website. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting. Writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute. If you're in the hall, you can do this on your iPhone or iPad. Please don't repeat contributions already made by other members. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call, and if any member who has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin the meeting so we can keep a track of whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly, taking their time and speaking directly into the microphone when making contributions. When referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to the recommendation. So with that, we'll move on to item 1, which is the Sediment and apologies. Nick, could you provide the sediment and any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, present in the hall today we have Gregor, Councillor Malcolm Johnston and Councillor John Campbell, and on Teams online we have Councillor Dryborough. Not present at the start of the meeting are Councillors Brodie, McFarlane and Wood. Thank you.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a message from Councillor McFarlane. He's trying to join, but he's having difficulties. I don't know if members of the staff can assist him.
And I can see Councillor Wood has popped up, so I'm assuming that's what your hands are. Thank you, Councillor Wood.
Maybe I can come in now.
Councillor Wood? You maybe can't come in if he's...
That's ridiculous.
I'm not hearing you very clearly, Andrew.
Thanks, Tracy. I can hear you clearly. I don't know what's going on.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest they wish to make? Nope, not seen anybody indicate. Item 3, minute of previous meeting of 7th of November 2024. Are we happy to note the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of November 2024? Yep, good. So moving on to item 4, schemes review, scheme of delegation to officers, report by Director Communities, and Vlad is here to assist any members with questions. So I'm very happy to open up the debate to members. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at page 22, 2.4.4. Can a delegate be, can delegate but responsibility still with the original person? I'm just wondering on that particular point. And on page 23, 2.7.2, the issue of the tennis club challenge from the local community council after approving a CAT. I'm just wondering, how that could be taken forward, once a decision has been made. I don't know if that's relevant, but just those 2 points. Thanks, Chair.
Vlad.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Campbell. In terms of your latter point, I would suggest that's probably more of an EMES that we can discuss that separately rather than through this particular report. In terms of 2.4.4, powers delegated to specific officers may be delegated by them. That's normal in schemes of delegation and is absolutely required. So, as you will note, for example, currently in the scheme that we currently have, I've got delegations such as environmental health training standards, but those need to be sub-delegated to those officers that are actually carrying out the operational element of it, so that they can, for example, they can carry out enforcement notices and so on. So what we tend to do is we authorise a letter. So we have a letter that authorises the relevant officers to carry out specific duties under that authorisation, and that's through that particular 2.4.4 delegation.
Can I come back in, Chair, if that's
course you
okay?
can.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I've been in that position before where we've delegated to, say, the director, and then it's been delegated to heads of service, etc., etc. I think it's more about the accountability once it's been delegated further down the chain. I think that's probably where I was coming from. Thanks.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yes, in terms of the accountability, it goes back to your delegation ultimately. So again, in the example I gave, ultimately I'm responsible for that service, so it would be my accountability in regards to any notices that we serve under that particular. The relevant officer will have the operational element of it and that authority to do so.
Thanks, Chair.
Happy with that, good. I have a question again at 2.4. And it's maybe just my reading of it. It says every attempt has been made to list specific powers which are available to officers. However, if a specific power is not mentioned in the scheme of delegation and responsibility to officers and statutory appointments, it does not necessarily mean that officers cannot exercise that power. That seems to me to be giving almost carte blanche power for anything that isn't listed, and which would give me a slight anxiety.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And hopefully I'll put that anxiety to rest. In terms of the way that that's applied, you'll see, and I think we discussed that previously, in terms of the scheme of delegations that currently sits has maybe different ways of approaching delegations, and within some of those you might just have an act. So it might actually mention legislation or regulations, but might not specifically say what part of that legislation or regulation it is that they are needing that authority for. It might be the whole act. So that's how that would be applied. So we would look at the delegation to say, do you have authority, for example, one of the roads legislation? Yes, in that case, that falls within that power. And although you're not specifically granted that, because actually it would be impossible for us to detail every specific detail within the legislation, you've got that generic power to apply that in the best interest of the council. But the other assurance I would give is where there are strategic and high-risk decisions that need to be taken, we as officers will obviously triage that and obviously bring it to either the relevant service committee or full council.
And that's fine, as it's more specific to acts rather than general delegations then. Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you to my colleague John Campbell for asking that question, because I had some difficulty getting in and he obviously thought that I might not get here. I heard Vlad's response in relation to it and recommending an EMES, but we're here to recommend the exception, the adoption of these papers. And the second part of John's question was 272, where it's proposed that any issue be determined contrary to a significant objection or a strong recommendation of statutory consultees. And we've recently had an issue whereby the Chief Executive has received a letter threatening legal action in relation to a community asset transfer. That has arisen because, having been consulted the Community Council, having initially agreed that it was agreeable to them, have decided that it's no longer agreeable. And I just feel that rather than waiting for an EMES, if we're here to accept these and propose them to full council, that we really should have some sort of clarification on that, because we're going to be making that proposal and it just saves it coming back. So if we can get some clarification on that, I'd really appreciate it.
Vlad.
I'm happy to talk about 2.72, and I understand the members' bringing particular examples, but I would suggest that this is not the forum for those particular examples, and therefore it's hard to discuss those without the full context, and that's why it's appropriate to have that further conversation out with that. But in terms of what it says within 2.72 is, as stated, that the Chief Exec will be the final arbiter of whether a matter is controversial, and then it lists what those are, where it's proposed that any issue be determined contrary to significant objections or the strong recommendation of statutory consultees. That's necessary in terms of the operational management of the council, and therefore that's why that's there, and that's reflective of other schemes or delegations that I've seen. In terms of specific examples, without going into them, ultimately the Chief Exec will obviously triage anything that comes through to the Chief Exec, and that includes if there is any potential for legal actions, and that will then be passed to the relevant service, which will be legal services, to look at the legal risks associated with that, to look at whether there is any way of settling. Sometimes there are in terms of legal actions, settling or coming to a compromise. So we would absolutely triage all of that, and ultimately the Chief Exec needs to make a decision in her role as the Chief Exec.
Councillor McFarlane, are you happy with that?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Thank you very much. Can I just ask a couple of little minor points as well? At 2.11, it says Council promotes the principle that decisions should be made at the lowest operational level. I think that the term lowest is a bit demeaning and could perhaps be changed to most appropriate. And on page 19, I just want to check the date, because we've got it will be agreed on 27th of March 2024, which perhaps is a typo. Thank you.
Black.
Yeah, just looking at my colleagues, I think you've picked up something that's absolutely appropriate, and we'll look at the wording of that and look to amend that for before going to full council. And where the date in which page? Sorry, I didn't capture that.
Page 19.
19.
19.
19.
March at the top.
Second line.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Yep. So we'll amend those two typos.
Thanks very much, Andy. Councillor Dryborough.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm looking at page 44, and as you're well aware, one of the council's priorities is to get to net zero, and that comes under the Director of Economy and Infrastructure, which covers a whole range of different things within those bullet points. I just need some clarification and confidence, I think, more than anything else, that the net zero, and it might cross into the next report as well, that the cross-party working group covers that and obviously makes reports back to a particular senior committee, and I'm presuming it's going to be this one. But I just want some confidence that the officer delegations are clear with the cross-party working group on net zero.
Do you want to pick up on that, Flag?
Thank you, Chair. And I probably don't have the answer to that. I don't know if my colleagues who are in the room are able to pick that up, but certainly what we can do is, again, look to ensure that there's something clearly specified there in terms of that net zero element of it. If I could, through you, Chair, bring in Mark Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Vlad. With regards to the specific point, we have retained the existing delegations that were approved last December, and as has been discussed previously, the primary aim of this piece of work has been to reflect the new structure. So we haven't actively looked at making any additions at this point here, but notwithstanding that, we will absolutely look whether it be prior to this going to full council, or whether that's something that we need to address as part of the subsequent review of the document, we will do that. But yeah, we can confirm that the content is the same as what was in the currently agreed document.
Thanks very much for that. Archie, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that, thanks.
Good. I think some of it, as you say, is actually covered in item 5 with a bit more detail under the delegations, and certainly I'm of the view that our climate change targets are intertwined across every directorate and every service that we deliver, but it has to sit somewhere, particularly in respect of reporting and the working group. So we'll just make sure we've got absolute clarity around that for the 28th of March. Perfect. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. It's really, it's quite a complex document when reading through it. And I was just wondering, would it be possible to get a comparator from another local authority or 2 or 3 other local authorities to see how we match up with their schemes of delegation?
Vlad.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wood. More than happy. We can probably do that just at the end of this particular meeting of the Review of Standing Orders Subcommittee, in terms of we've already done that benchmarking exercise, and we've got a whole raft of scheme of delegations that we're quite happy to provide to you and any other members that wish that.
Thank you. That would be very much appreciated.
I suppose accepting that they won't have entirely the same structures as us, so that there will be variables anyway, but yeah, the benchmarking work has been done. Yeah, good. Any other members wishing to come in at this point? Nope. Okay, with that, I'll move to the recommendations, and we've been asked to agree to recommend full council amendment to the scheme of delegation to officers as outlined at Appendix 1. So we're happy to agree that with the additional detail that will need to go forward on the 28th. Good, thank you. Item 5, Schemes Review, Scheme of Administration and Delegation to Committees. Report by Director Communities. And again, Vlad is here to assist members with any questions. So very happy to open up the debate. Councillor Campbell.
Yep, thanks very much, Chair, and I appreciate Vlad and his team coming around the groups to have a sort of face-to-face discussion prior to this. It was very helpful. However, this is the public meeting, so it might be appropriate to raise some of those questions again, if that's possible. The first one that I would like to talk about would be the area committee when it comes to decision making. Now, over the years, it's kind of depleted what its role actually was. However, we just made a decision at the last full council that we're going to delegate to this Dale area committee around the town board position. So that does give the area committees some delegated powers, but I think I can only speak for my own group that we feel that the area committees have not got the same sort of delegated powers as maybe what it should have, or maybe I don't want to turn the clock back to what it used to be. We used to have planning, for example, used to sit with the area committees and things like that. But I think there is a wee bit of concern about area committees on that point. I don't know if we can get some help to maybe make that decision later on, at least make a recommendation at full council. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, thank you. Before we bring Vlad in, I think it's a concern of probably all the groups on the council, and has been the subject of a lot of discussion around, what are the roles of area committees, what should be there, what shouldn't be there, how frequently they should meet. So I think we need to have a fairly comprehensive conversation about that. But Vlad, I'll turn to you.
Yes, thank you through yourself, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Campbell. I think that was a common theme in the discussions we've had previous to us going around the political groups, but also through those forums. As you'll see, obviously within the report itself, in 4.9, 4.10, we refer to the ongoing work that's been carried out on area committees, and our suggestion is that this will be reported back to full council after the summer recess. But what we want to do is, again, some more of that engagement and consultation with members to ensure that what we're taking forward is in essence, that sounding board of what members have indicated throughout. So we've done some of that, but we need to refine that so that we can put a report forward for members' consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate that, Vlad. But there was also the point raised about recommendations going to service committees, for example, from area committees. They don't seem to be reflected in the reports when you get the service committee report, whether it's education or whatever. But a number of the area committees might actually fall out with the time frame of getting those recommendations. So right across the piece, different area committees might have different sort of responses or recommendations that they wish to put to the service committees, and they may not get that opportunity because of the way the diaries. I don't know if that's something that we can reflect on. Thanks, Chair.
Vlad.
Yes, through yourself, Chair. More than happy to look at that, and we've already noted that, and Councillor Campbell is correct that that was raised, and we'll note that in terms of, one, the ongoing conversation, and two, whether there's any low-hanging fruits that we can try and implement within that for any fourth, not the current round of area committees, because most of those reports are already printed, but for the next round, absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Dryburgh.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's page 110, 5.2.5 to 5.2.9 on page 111. Obviously, we have the finance procurement transformation at the moment, and I'm presuming that this is the thing that's going to take over from that. I think we may be in we have a bit of issue on this particular one, because specifically with procurement, we've had changes in the past where we've not been particularly good at scrutinising procurement. And if this is part of for instance, a 20 agenda item of reports, the procurement and scrutinising of that procurement may be missed. So I've got a wee bit of a concern, and again, it's more about confidence that this will be done properly, and I don't know if there's an opportunity to have a discussion about that either today or sometime in the future.
Vlad.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and Councillor Dryburgh raises a point again that was another question that was raised through the various engagement sessions that we've had, and I think it's a very valid one in terms of the business and the amount of business going to the various service committees. I think it's important to note within that we've got in the report a review within 12 months, and I think that's really important to give us that baseline. It's very important as well for both officers and the chair and vice chair of the relevant service committees to manage the business and to ensure that the right number of meetings are scheduled in as and when, so to avoid the point about very large agendas which are just not going to be manageable. So absolutely, we've taken that fully on board, and what we will look to do is to have an ongoing monitoring of that, and the Business Bureau would also have a role to play within that.
Archie.
Yeah, thanks for that, Vlad. And obviously, when you mentioned there the amount of meetings, depending on the business that we have to get through. So, a minimum of 4 would be, the place where I'd be sort of supporting, but we'd require, I believe, in the first instance, specifically in the first 12 months, to look at that business and the outcomes from it. To ensure that we can do it within that minimum of 4. But I say again, it would just be a minimum of 4, and it would be the business that we need to get through.
Thank you. Vlad's agreeing with you. Any other members? John?
I seem to be hogging the show here, Chair, but yeah, just a couple of points. We're asked at 2.1 to recommend to full council, but subject to the decisions to be taken in items 6 and 7, which is later on in the report. I suppose my first question would be, should we not have done 6 and 7 first? So that recommendation would have been taken in item 5 as we are at the moment. And the second one is 2.2, we're asked to consider the voting rights as well. I mean, we do look at the reports, and I think particularly for me on page 171, where you've got the appendix 3 from the Diocese of Galloway, you know, I'm not sure if they're actually saying that they're, you know, in agreement, or are they reluctantly being arm twisted and in that sort of sense. If you know, maybe a wee bit of explanation, because I believe their rights have been in there since 1929, so it's quite a long time, and they've obviously got concerns. And I think you know, we need to consider that. You know. Maybe not here, but maybe in full council. But it is something to bear in mind when we take this paper forward. Thank you, Chair.
Vlad.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And very valid questions, Councillor Campbell. I think in terms of the first one, which is as to the order, we always look at the constitutional element of the infrastructure for governance first, and then thereafter any subcommittees that may follow. So that's why we've done it in that way. So it's from an officer's perspective and a governance perspective, it's crucial that we have the core infrastructure for governance agreed first, which will be for full council to do, and then thereafter any subcommittees will then be simply administratively rearranged in line with those further reports. In terms of your question around the religious representatives, yes, I think it is probably difficult for officers also to have that clarity on whether it's an objection. As such, I don't think the words objection were particularly inserted within the correspondence. However, when you read into it, it's quite clear their position in terms of potentially maintaining that. From, again, a legal and governance perspective, it is for full council ultimately to decide whether to have non-elected members having voting rights or not, albeit the legislation in regards to education specifically states that there are certain religious reps within that committee. So that's accepted. Is purely the point about full council decision thereafter. So it is for all members to consider.
Okay. Do you want to come back in, John? Yeah.
Just very quickly, Chair, if I may, just on the point of the 2 further items later on. I mean, obviously this is a change to the restructure, so everything's sort of up in the air at the moment, shall we say, and we really need to try and get this right, you know, if the restructure is going to be successful. But item 6 specifically refers to you know, the tackling poverty, which sits on some of the or across different directorates, shall we say, and that's the same for housing. It sits across 3 directorates, or there's elements of housing in there, and yet item 6 we're asked to have a standalone or dedicated subcommittee, whereas the housing subcommittee will be under just one directorate. It's just a case of how do we feed that crossways rather than sort of just staying in a silo up and down, you know, if it's across 3 directorates. I don't know if you want to leave that until we get to that item, Chair, but it's just a concern that if we're going to agree this to go forward on item 5, that we reflect upon those things. Thanks.
Absolutely. And could it be that we take items 6 and 7 ahead of 5 at full council to reflect that? Because I think items 6 and 7 came from a member request, and it wasn't a motion, but was it a motion for another member's request at committee? So that they have been requested, and one of them, as you say, has options, the other one doesn't, which is slightly different as well. Vlad?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I would go back to my original answer in terms of, from a governance perspective, you really need to agree the constitutional core infrastructure first, and then thereafter any subcommittees, whether they're subcommittees of full council or subcommittees of the various service committees, that's again for full council to take that final decision, but that will be easier once you know what the core infrastructure is.
Yeah, so you need the parent committee first. Okay, right, I'm with you. I think, again, just in respect of the voting rights as well, we need absolute clarity before the 28th around the legal element, because when the other councils started to look at removing voting rights, I asked a few questions around that, and because I couldn't understand how they could, because I thought it was a legal thing that they were entitled to, and we were given explicit advice that they're legally allowed to sit on the committee, but they don't legally have to have the vote. And yet what's contained within this is indicating that actually they maybe do have a legal historic right to vote, which wasn't the advice that I was given originally. So I think we need absolute clarity around that. I don't want us getting stuck in a quarter session somewhere with folk pulling out 1920s documents.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy for us to look at that specific point again. However, I can give clarity that what we've looked at, and we've consulted with our colleagues in SOLAR, Society of Local Authority Lawyers and Administrators, and it's very clear that the legal view in terms of your question about the decision making of those that are non-elected members and voting rights is fully within the decision making of the council. It's not within the legislation. The legislation for education does not specifically mention voting rights within that, and therefore it's a bit like your earlier question. If you don't have a delegation, then do you have or do you not have that right? And the answer is you don't, unless you can pin it on a specific element of the legislation, which we can't at this point in time. However, they have the statutory right of representation.
Yes. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As we're going towards a new structure, clearly we're moving certain parts of the council to different areas of responsibility, and I'm a little bit concerned as to what checks and balances we have in place. So what is the risk assessment that we have to ensure that there are no unintended consequences?
Vlad.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Could I maybe just ask Councillor McFarlane maybe just to further expand, just to help me get a bit of clarity before I respond?
Yeah, I think my perspective would be that we currently have education in one directorate and we have communities within another, and then what we're doing is we're taking something like education and we're saying about community well-being as well. So there's an opportunity there for gaps between what our current structure is and what we'll end up with, and where rights and responsibilities in relation to officers might lie. So I'm just wondering what risk assessment processes we have to make sure that we cover all those areas, and we don't end up with either gaps there or duplication of effort or responsibility, or we end up with a point where nobody's actually dealing with it. Thank you. Is that helpful?
Vlad's nodding. Vlad.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor McFarlane, yes, that probably relates more to the previous item, I would suggest, in terms of the officers element of it, and ensuring that, in essence, nothing falls between the cracks, if I'm understanding your question. I think what we have done, certainly in terms of the governance team alongside the kind of senior management team, is have a good look at all the schemes of delegations, so that's both committees and officers. They've all been consulted, they've all checked as best we can in terms of ensuring that we don't have any missed delegations that are required in order for officers to do their job. And we are going to have an ongoing conversation in terms of the implementation part to ensure that we are obviously addressing any issues that may arise from time to time. But that is probably more related with the officers' authority and delegations rather than the committees as such. The committees is obviously the governance mechanism for the officers reporting their services.
Are you happy with that, Andy?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dryborough?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and it's page 117 on this one. I'm sure Stephen Thompson will be happy that I raised this, and it's about common good funds. I don't see anything in there about those common good assets that don't have a committee. And I refer to Langham, for instance, and where's Dennis Mail when you need him when you talk about that sort of stuff. I'm just wondering where, you know, there are common good assets across the region, but there seems to be a few missing within this particular report.
Vlad?
Thank you, Chair. Are we saying that what's missing is in terms of the various areas? Because it's probably important to note that it's for each area committee to decide whether to have a common good subcommittee or not, and therefore that area committee can still deal with common good matters without having a common good subs. So that's probably the answer I would give, that it's all areas have that authority for common good. It's just whether they decide to delegate that, and currently what you've got there is the ones that are currently delegated to subcommittees.
Yeah. Archie?
Yeah, thanks. I think it would be useful to make members aware of what common good assets are already managed by the area committees. And I know that, for instance, Langham is managed by the Annandale and Estill area committee. I'm sure there are others. I didn't see it within the scheme of administration.
I do actually get your point on this, Archie, because as you know, we've got Lockerbie and Lochmaben Common Good as an example, which has done a huge amount of work identifying what is common good. And there's been a few anomalies that have appeared over the last 2 or 3 years that has come as a bit of a surprise to us. But that very specifically does that detailed listing and reporting to that common good. Do we have a similar piece of work being done for, say, Langham that doesn't have a common good that would then in turn report to area committees, and where would that sit? Because Langham will not be the only outlier. Moffat will be another example. You know, there'll be lots of settlements. So it's where is that work being done to identify what is common good, and where does it report to when there isn't a common good?
Yeah, and I think for me that's correct, Chair. I mean, the Lockerbie and Lochmaben Common Good subcommittee comes under Annandale and Estill 6.3.3 of this report, but it doesn't say anything about those outlined. And you're right, Moffat's another area which has got, you know, common good assets. And I think it's just a list basically of, you know, where it comes under the delegations of the area committees, what area committees cover each of the common good assets that have not got a subcommittee.
Through yourself, Chair, I think I know that Nick might want to come in on this. First and foremost, I think take that fully on board, and we are currently, and I know that Jackie's online, we're currently doing a piece of work on common goods that had been asked a while back, and what we have done so far is try to have that absolute asset register for members' site. We're still populating that because it's been a much bigger piece of work than we'd anticipated. But what we could put within that register is exactly where they're reported to, and that would then clarify it for all members. So we're hoping to have that with members by the end of this year, and therefore that would have a very clear line of reporting as well. Hopefully that'll be helpful, but I'll bring in Nick in case any other comments.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Vlad. Yes, it was merely to suggest maybe we can look at some former words in 6.3 and maybe cascading into 6.312 to clarify that where there is no established common good for a particular asset, that the delegation reverts to the or lies with the area committee. But as Vlad suggested, there's a sort of fuller piece of work coming forward on that to list all assets and where responsibility lies, just to clarify that.
Thanks, Nick. Archie?
I think I think that's a very useful response there, Chair, and you know, it'd be good to have that. But even in those particular areas, that the common good assets are going to be looked at, and there'll be a report coming back in brackets or something like that, just to make sure that members are aware of what's happening.
Good, thanks, Archie. Nods all round there. Any other members? John?
Yeah, just to agree with yourself, Chair, and Archie, just on those points, because quite often we find out it's not common good until it's actually up for sale or disposal of some sort. So updating the register is probably where we need to be, I would suggest. But if we capture those in this report, ready for full council, I think every member would be satisfied with that. Thanks, Chair.
Good. Nods all round. No other members? So with that and the few wee additional bits of information that we'll seek before the 28th and additional wording around common good, are we happy to agree to recommend to full council the amended scheme of administration and delegation to committees as detailed in Appendix 1 and is summarised at 4.1 to 4.4, subject to decisions being taken at 2.2 of this report and at items 6 and 7 of this meeting? We're happy to agree? Good. 2.2, agree to consider voting rights as summarised at 4.5 to 4.7 and agree whether to recommend to full council the removal or not of voting rights for religious representatives. I think, John?
Yeah, Gail, thanks, Chair. Yeah, we're asked to agree whether or not. I don't think we can agree at this moment in time, so I think we should just agree that it goes to full council, if that makes sense. Thanks, Chair.
I would totally agree with that. Yeah. 2.3, notwithstanding the decision taken at 2.1, agree to receive further reports on the ongoing reviews as outlined at 4.8 to 4.12. Yeah. And 2.4, agree to recommend to full council to carry out a review of the updated scheme of administration and delegation to committees after an initial period of 12 months as summarised at 4.15. Happy to agree? Good, excellent. Okay, so moving on to item 6, council arrangements for developing and reporting on tackling poverty and inequalities, report by Head of Governance and Assurance and Interim Head of Community Services. As I said earlier, this was a request from a member from the floor at a previous meeting, and we've got Mark Malloy online, who will be very happy to take any questions. So I'll open up the debate to members, unless you have anything that you want to add, Mark.
No, Chair, happy to go straight to questions.
Good, thank you. Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks, Chair. I think this is absolutely the right thing to do. I think that we've seen how cost of living and poverty has affected, you know, right across the region, and I think this is absolutely the right thing to do, and I'm happy to support the recommendations in this.
Thanks very much, Archie. I've got, sorry.
Councillor Campbell, I think was.
Oh, Councillor Campbell, yes.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Archie. I think this is long overdue. You know, we've been in the cost of living crisis for a number of years now, and we really need to have something in place, and I welcome the report. However, I would like to suggest that it needs to have teeth. You know, there's no point having a subcommittee if we can't, you know, deal with the issues in hand and make the recommendations, whether it's to the other directorates or other committees. But I hope that's taken into consideration. But obviously, it's going to be a full council decision on this item. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not getting any sense from any of you that you're wanting to suggest an option at this stage. Because there's pros and cons to a number of the options, really, isn't there? Would that be something that we just leave in the gift of full council?
I would say so. I don't think we could make that decision here today, Chair. Yeah, full council. You'll probably get a bit more in the debate.
That's fine. All happy with that? Yep. Okay. No other members wishing to speak at the moment, so we'll move to recommendations. We've to consider the options for future arrangements for developing and reporting of work around poverty and inequalities as set out in paragraphs 4.7 to 4.8, but we're just going to put all options to full council as read, and 2.2, agree next steps as referenced in paragraph 4.9. Happy to agree? Good. Okay, and on to item 7, Housing Subcommittee, report by Head of Governance and Assurance and Head of Economy and Development. We've got Jamie Little here to assist members if they have any questions. So happy to open this up to members. Councillor Campbell, good contributor today.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, as I said in item 5, because housing cuts across 3 of the new directorates in the restructure, it's a case of how do we feed that back, the recommendations, you know, because this is going to be a subcommittee of economy and infrastructure as opposed to the previous item that we just discussed, which is going to be a standalone. I'm just wondering if that is an option that we may recommend to full council because of the similar issues to the anti-poverty stuff. It cuts across 3, maybe even 4 directorates, including the new social work one. So it's probably just a wee plea. Maybe that's something that we can consider when we recommend this to go to full council. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Campbell. Before I come to Archie, I mean, I'm not 100% sure about this one. I think because we don't have our own housing stock anymore, which is a fundamental difference to many years ago. We do have a good strategic housing forum. We have a housing subgroup of the Regional Economic Partnership. There's actually quite a lot of discussion in a lot of spaces with elected members. So if we were going to set up an additional housing sub, I think it would need to have real value and teeth. But you know, I'm in members' hands and certainly in full council's hands on the 28th. But you know, I just think this is a bit of a 50-50 for me. Councillor John, do you want to come back in?
If I may, Chair, thanks very much. Yeah, it's. I mean, we talked about item 6, which is the anti-poverty stuff, but housing also is part of that as well. So I don't know if item 6 and 7 could be put together in one committee as opposed to having 2 separate subcommittees. Maybe that's another suggestion. Thanks, Chair.
That's another scenario, yeah. Councillor Dryborough.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And you know, I'm very much against having a subcommittee for having a subcommittee's sake. And the Strategic Housing Forum, I think there's a lot of good work with Jamie and all the RSLs and, you know, the organisation and social work and education, you know, can be part of that as well, because obviously, you know, having a good house actually improves education for the children's chances as well. And John Campbell's absolutely right. You know, the anti-poverty stuff has an effect on housing as well. I don't think I would have the full support of my group by saying let's not have a housing subcommittee, because I'm a bit like 50-50 on this particular one. And I think it would be appropriate to take this to full council to have that wider discussion on, you know, all the elected members having an opportunity to say what they want and see if they need a housing subcommittee. As I say, myself, I think the Strategic Housing Forum plays that role at the moment anyway, and we do discuss, or certainly the member that goes on behalf of my group does discuss a lot of the issues within the report and within the previous report as well. And I think we've got, and I'm not saying this because he's actually online. We've got quite a good housing manager there that, you know, gives us the information that we require to make, you know, informed decisions. But I think this one really needs to go to full council so that all members can have a say on this, mainly because, as I say, I'm a bit like yourself, 50-50 on this one, whether we need it or not.
thanks very much for that, Archie. And I think as well, you know, we know that housing is one of the top priorities of the council, along with transport and economy and the other areas. And there are local authorities who are in the process or who've just declared a housing emergency, and we're probably not that far behind them. So housing is a major issue, but how we sit that within our structure and within what already exists, I think maybe needs some serious thought and discussion at full council. Malcolm.
Yeah, it's just on the back of Councillor Campbell as well, with, you know, discussing the previous matter. I mean, I do think there is merit in having some means of bringing all these things together, because everything is interlinked, and it would be useful, in my opinion, to have some forum whereby everything is brought into one place. It's a similar discussion that I'm sure we would have with Archie as well, with the climate change stuff, as well as the fact that it cuts across the whole council as well. So again, it's how you bring all that together in one place.
Good. Thank you for that and your contributions. So no other member looking to speak at the moment, so we'll move to the recommendations. We have 2.1, consider the establishment of a housing subcommittee to take on relevant functions of the Economy and Infrastructure Committee as set out in the new structure of the council detailed at para 4.4, but we're going to again refer that to full council for further debate, and subject to this consideration make recommendations at 2.2, but we're not making any specific recommendations today, so that's fine. And item 8, I don't have any other urgent business, so thank you very much all for your attendance and contributions.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.